Well, we're going to explore workholding today, and I wasn't really sure what to put together for an agenda, so I'm just going to kind of ramble on this for a little bit. And if anybody has anything to add, or I know a couple people brought some extra things that they can share, talk about. But does anybody have any questions or any issues with workholding, or anything you specifically like us to cover? All right, everybody's an expert.
Right, well, everybody go home.
Don't need the meeting.
We're only here at the demo.
Well, I have a question.
Yeah.
It's probably a newbie thing. So, when I'm taking a tendon off, I lose about 50% of my bolts. They come off and crack, you know, anything happens. I just don't know what I'm doing wrong.
Going through the bottom, or?
No. They just fly off. They come off the
Tendon break off?
no, the bolt comes right off the G-hook.
Well, that's unsettling.
Yeah. I use one of those is it Kohler?
Oh, cold jaws?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's that last little bit when you don't have the tailstock on it. Or do you guys keep a tailstock on that all the time, or?
So there's a couple different answers to that, and I'll take a shot at it. We'll let Paul take a shot at it, but I mean, we'll get into vacuum chucking. I do a lot of vacuum chucking, but when I don't have a vacuum chuck available, I'll leave the tenon on and the tailstock up on the tenon until the very last little bit, and I'll actually kind of whittle that down until there's not much left, and saw it off, and then sand the rest of it.
Yeah.
Right, because it's, you know, I've done a lot with vacuum chucking, and I trust it as long as my gauge is able to vacuum. But there's Longworth trucks, and we'll get into that a little bit. But if I don't have a good way to do it, I do the tailstock on and then just keep whittling away until it's just a little bit. Take one of those little Japanese box saws and cut off the rest, and then sand it until it's blended in.
Perfect answer.
I'd also say that use smaller size gouges. So the less bite you take of it, the less, hold you have on it. So smaller, go down to the 3/8 or whatever since you're finishing. Also go into the chuck, particularly taking off the tenon towards where you want to finish off flush.
Usually
go inward, pushing in, so you're actually pushing the wood
Against
into the chuck instead of going across it, which
Yeah, I
you
don't
get
go
a catch
across it.
you're watching.
I think the other thing with cold jaws too is just the way those nubs are, depending on how your rim of your bowl is, it may not be holding it that great as well. So you may want it more on the inside if it's more of a closed in bowl, have it come from the inside out for holding it. So just that's another couple things to look at is, the rim of the bowl and how it sits on those cold jaws.
Yeah, I was gonna bring into that. So the original cold jaws I probably bought 20 years ago, the pins sat straight out, so they're perpendicular from the plate. So they really don't get a great grip. Like the newer ones, I just went on Amazon and ordered a replacement set, actually curve in. They have 4 sides on them with different curvatures on them. They hold a lot better.
Well,
And you want to go at a slower speed just
coming off,
to,
so I'll leave the tailstock
Yeah.
on and just keep whittling away until I get the smaller nub as I dare there, and then just cut that off and do a little bit of sanding and blend it in.
But hand sand it.
Well, I usually use my drill sand, but blend it in so that it's, it's fine, you can't feel any differences with your finger. So I guess while I'm out here, and forgive the sketching, I'll tell you a funny story. I was working with a group from England and when I was employed with General Electric, and they just had a fire, and I was over there to help recover that. And so I had the ME team there, and we were brainstorming around the table about a particular process that we had to rebuild. And so I quickly sketched something up, and I said, flipped it around, I showed the group, explained what I was doing. I said, well, what do you think of that? And the oldest one of the group looked at me and he says, well, he says, I like the idea, but the sketch is horrible. And so, obviously, I haven't improved any. These are the major different types of tenons, I guess. So, this is a traditional reverse dovetail. And the beauty of that, obviously, is once you grab that in the jaws, it holds pretty tightly and it's not going anywhere. There's also these straight tenons, depends on the jaws. So these jaws are set up more for straight tenon. But typically what I like to do with these is right at the bottom here, you can see this blow. I'll take this little carbide detail tool. Right? And I'll go in and I'll make a little notch right at the root of that. And so that does two things. It cleans up that corner so there isn't a radius to interfere with the clamping. But also, if you look at these jaws closely, there's a tiny little reverse dovetail in there. And so this allows that reverse dovetail to get in there and grab. It pulls it hard against the face. So when you recheck it, your run out is minimal. And I mean, I don't know if everybody does that, but I do it with straight tenons. And then lastly, there's these inside tenons. I don't use them very often. Sometimes when the tea lights that I make, I don't know if you've ever seen them, but there's a hole in there for the candle, and I'll flip them around and do an inside check with this chuck. The concern with inside chucking is now you're trying to split the wood, versus these two chucking methods, you're compressing the wood. And so if you're using this for the whole bowl, my opinion, it can get interesting. So, because you can't put a lot of force on it, right? You're trying to split the wood.
The other challenge with the inside one is you're turning green wood, and you've let it dry, and now that recess is oval. How do you clean up that recess so it's round again? That's the challenge that I see with the recesses, that to clean it up for the second turn is sometimes a little bit of a challenge. I've done it, it's usually not that easy to do, but yeah.
Left, or you get a little bit of a catch, you're gonna break the inside tenon, and now you gotta start all over. And what do? Generally, after you've done that, you can be able to maybe glue the thing back in, but otherwise, then you gotta eat into the bolt with the new one, or you turn the bottom of the bolt into a compression tenon.
Is anybody predominantly using this and having success with it? Because
I've had pretty good success with it. I generally use it on larger bowls where I've got plenty of material, so it's not going to pop those things open. I can torque them pretty tight. I don't make them terribly deep. A 1/4 inch is probably much more than needed. An 1/8 is maybe on the edge. On a big bowl, a lot of times I'm not looking to have a foot, so I want the bowl drive, and it may not have as much thickness as I might on a big bowl. So we can get it nice and deep. Right?
so do you finish that flat at the end of it, or do you leave that recess?
Well, I'll go in and remove anything that makes it look like it was intended to hold the wood. I'll round it off to the inside, I'll taper it, finish it off. Same way you would with a tenon.
Yeah.
You give some thought in either case to what you want the thing to look like at the end. It's more important with the tenon because you lose a lot of wood to a tenon.
I use them on the bottom of wig stands, it just gives me a nice flat surface, not going across the whole bottom.
So on wig stands, not that I've done a lot of them, but the hole for the spindle, this chuck will go into that.
Yeah.
And it makes it nice. Which one?
The big tall one right next to me.
This one?
Yeah.
This is Claude's chuck. I'll let Claude talk about it.
So I brought a couple of these. I meant to bring, this was intended for, And obviously, I've got a tenon on the backside here, so it gets chucked up and it's routed this way on the lathe. And what I made it for was a lampshade. And the top end of the lampshade needed to be a certain size on the interior diameter to allow a ring to hold that lampshade up. When I roughed it out, finished it, I forgot to make the recess. So after it dried, I wanted to remount this lampshade to take some off on the interior. Exterior is finished, so I wasn't mounting the exterior. I created a recess here that was the exact size, jammed that shade into this recess, really, so it was really tight fit. And this collar was just meant to keep it in that recess from popping out. And I was able to reach in through here and hollow that inside. The bottom of the shade was kind of round, but the top of the shade was still pretty round. And I jammed it into this recess, was able to take a little bit, took about a 1/4 shot halfway out. Couldn't go all the way out, didn't need to go all the way out. It was thin enough at the bottom edge of that shade. So it was really from here in that I needed to create that recess. I think it was Rick saying, why didn't you use carriage bolts? You know, this one's all the way out, so that not much of that was exposed to where you're turning. I don't know if you can get carriage bolts that long, but you know, this thing's spinning around, so there's some danger there.
Yeah, that's, yeah. You don't want those bolts sticking up too far.
Take the knuckles off. So, but I was reaching in with a hauling tool. Yeah. So that was great for this.
Well, if you wanted to use it for other things of varying sizes, you can get those nuts that go join two rods together.
Oh, yeah.
That way you can exchange different sides, so you only need a short carriage bolt to the top and then adjust the rest.
Good point. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, if anybody wants a commercial version, says, you can get, so there's a Walmart that they sell various rings that you can put similar to that and bolts, so a varying length. So there's a commercial version of it.
I didn't know that.
Ron Brown's best.
So any questions on that? I brought in 2 things. So this other one is, I don't know if you want to zoom in on this, Brian, but this is a number 2 taper. I have no idea where I got this. But it works great on small knobs. It's got almost like it's got a set screw in here and a little faceplate and a threaded screw on the end. So you can thread a piece of wood on here and mount this into your recess and turn small things. But I've never seen these commercial anywhere. So I have no idea where I got it. Yourselves got one in the back?
We're aging ourselves now. It's called the Elio drive, E-L-I-O.
Oh, Elio?
Yeah, I forget, there were 2 guys in Oregon or Washington State that came out with the idea. This is a 2-inch.
So these work great for small knobs. You got to drill a hole to hold the knob on anyway. So you drill that little hole, put it on, the knobs are on and off the lathe really quick. These work great.
And this one is a point, the idea, the original intent, the reason why I bought it was because I was trying to balance the blank to get the growth ring centered in the bottom of the hole. So this allowed, because these are adjustable, screwed in and out. This is adjustable as well with an Allen wrench. So you can bring it out in, I don't know how long. So you still have bark on it, it'll pierce the bark and that sort of stuff. It was just a handy little gizmo, very specific for specific things. And to continue with the donut chuck, this is more of I see that and I think of a specific item. This would be more in general. So, you get the idea. It's a round, and what you do is put it into here, you could line up the grain, squeeze it back down, pull it out, and stop it, you know. But that was the idea.
What's like with a spoon?
It was a bunch of soup. It was some guy who was making them with an offset handle that had, you know, and in his demonstration, he was joking that if you're charging $500 for a scoop, you should have a little detail. And some people actually took him as serious. You know, it was like, yeah, $500 for a scoop, in your dreams, people. But it just allowed for making the blank, hauling it out, and then take it out, and it was a done deal.
I want to go through the show and tell. Well, let's take a moment now and do that. I brought 3 pieces because I didn't have far to go. But this is just a couple of the latest bowls. This is spalted yellow birch. This is a 4 bowl. There's another bowl down over there that chipped out when I was pouring it. But spalted yellow birch is quite pretty. And then this one is a red oak burl. I had some trees cut out here last fall. And the woodcutters found a burl on one of them, so that's a red oak burl that came off the top.
I'm a little wonder why you turned it down, Chris.
No, that wasn't bad. I had scarier ones.
So how'd you hold that to take the tenon off?
What's that?
How'd you hold that to take the tenon off?
Vacuum chip.
No, I used the jam chuck, and just as I described, I whittled it down until it was just a little bit, took the saw, knocked off, and sanded the bottom. Didn't hold that on the vacuum chuck because it wouldn't hold vacuum. What's next?
This is a erosion maple bowl that I made, and I entered this in a competition last fall, and I got the judge's award for it. She described it as, I'm not sure exactly how she described it, because I almost fell off my chair when she said my name. But I think she was, you know, the orientation of the ambrosia and the curve inside and along with the foot.
Very nice.
That was Donna Banfield's comments.
Yeah, you mentioned the balance with the ambrosia that you got.
Yeah, how perfectly it was placed on the wood.
Yeah, the funny thing about this piece of wood, it was free.
It was free.
Should all be free.
It's the best type of wood to turn, by the way.
So this is spalted hammering. I got it, Bruce Bay, is that the place called there? But it's pretty nice figure. This, speaking of taking the tenon off, there was a bigger tenon on here. I used the cold jaws on the inside of this, right? Because it's curved a little bit. If you put it on the outside, I have the same problem that people have. It comes flying right off, right? But putting it on the inside worked pretty well.
If you take some of those plastic wine corks and drill through the center of them, and you can make fairly long ones that would grab the extra.
On the outside, you go around the curve.
Yeah.
So.
Very nice, thank you.
Imperative by my project manager, who said you got too much wood and start doing something with it. I said, hey, I actually started designing a long time ago and was kind of looking at it. And intends to be a bowl for air plants, so it's sort of semi-hollow because need a little weight at the bottom. And I figured I've seen something before where they use all kinds of different things for it, but I happen to have, it's 2019, just before COVID hit, I was on a trip to Scotland and went to a place that they had something they called heather gems. My project manager found that place that sold all kinds of gemstones. So, really interesting project. They go out into the hills and cut out stems of dead heather, and they color them under pressure. in the thing processed, and then they tie them together and embed them in epoxy, different colors epoxy and so forth. And they make all kinds of stuff from it, pendants, pens, all kinds of stuff, jewelry. And they happen to have on the table a whole bunch of pieces that they had left over from things like, as long as she's buying all kinds of jewelry, I bought a whole bunch of pieces of these heather gems and been sitting around since, did a couple things, but most of they've been sitting around in the shop since 2019, waiting for something to do with it.
Did you match it dollar for dollar?
No, but it was close. Actually, these are quite expensive. The people were quite expensive what they had. But anyway, I cut slices off with a mini saw with a diamond blade and was able to shape them a little bit. Use some spacers in there, and it was still, you know, and embedded it with the epoxy was still a little bit. So I ended up gluing it to a piece of scrap plywood and then turning these until I got the thickness, and then be able to use some green epoxy and pushed it in because still because of both the heather gems and the epoxy, there was still some gaps that I had to fill in. I had to do several runs before I actually got all filled in.
Yeah, in Applewood, I made 2 hollow forms that came out fairly well. I enjoy these, I call them spirit forms that conjure the spirits. You know, looking in here, and trying to get people motivated to want to buy them, that they'll be able to connect with their ancestors.
Well, you don't see your life flash before your eyes.
So this was a mistake. I just thought it was interesting. So I have a visualizer for hollow forms, a camera and a TV, and you know, when you have that, you really know when you're getting to the edge, except when they come out of alignment. If you don't turn the set screw tight enough, and that's exactly what happened. I thought I was perfectly coming along the edge, and then all of a sudden, to my surprise, the top came off. And so I was left with this, and you know, just made it a wide mouth one. But lesson learned: always make sure your set screws are tight and you got the right alignment, or otherwise you end up with whatever this is.
You gotta go back and check once a week.
Yeah, gotta check. Yeah.
So, I had a maple tree go down, and we cut it up, and it's been sitting for a couple of years. And so this is, you know, I have a sister bolt for it. So it's a very nice vaulted maple. But the problem is, when you get it too thin, it just breaks, it just cracks all up. It doesn't have a lot of support. So I didn't get it as thin. The sister, got down to about under 1/4 inch, and then it exploded. Just because it's just not enough strength in the material anymore. So this one's got, was probably another 1.5 inches higher, but it just kept breaking off. So there's quite a bit of a CA in there. And it's a little porous. Every time you get it nice and sanded, you come down the next morning and it's all rough again. So there's about 6 coats of finish on it, but it still feels a little bit rough in spots.
Can I ask a quick question while you're on that? When you have a crack that you see while you're turning, at what point do you add the CA glue? Do you wait until after you sand it? Do you wait till after you put the first coat of finish on it? At what point in the process should you glue?
I glue, and if I need to, I sawdust. Other people do that.
Yeah. At that point, well,
At
it's
that
still,
point,
yeah.
Because when I reach, then I gotta turn some more.
Yeah.
I'm sand some more, I get that excess glue off at that point too. Glue it when you're in the finishing stages of sanding, I guess.
Okay.
So,
And he recommended I use marine epoxy that you use for boats.
Yeah.
To fill in rock and stuff like that. It soaks in, a good 1/16 of an inch anyways. And I did several layers while I was finished turning it, and it turned out very nice. I would have brought it today, but it wasn't finished yet.
Yeah.
But,
That's the problem I have with that.
Yeah, but then you don't
It's
have-
gotta come to this wood.
yeah, you don't need to worry about, arsenic and, all the other stuff. But epoxy, I think, for me, feels much safer. You just kind of layer it on, cut a bit, layer it a little bit more on, and until you finish bolting, it's just turned out perfect. I have to send you a picture of it there.
Yeah, I've also done a bunch of very small maple, very old maple come down in friend's place and gave it a lot. And what I found is that if you use some shellac, particularly shellac there, let it dries pretty quickly, you can turn it back on, but the shellac gets into the pores and solidifies it enough. And it's, of course, a food safe finish, so if you're turning it for a bowl, you get enough shellac in, you'll harden the shank up.
So there's a couple other products on the market if you really want to go all out for monkey wood. One of them's called cactus juice. And what's the name of that other one that Kelly Lamont demoed at your shop?
It was cactus juice that she did.
I thought she had, no, it wasn't cactus juice, it was something else.
So I think it may be a knockoff brand. It's the same, it's a stabilizer, wood stabilizer. Yeah.
So you can go through that, and so you submerge the wood, you put it under vacuum, you draw all the air out of it that's replaced with this compound cactus juice or whatever his name is, and then you bake it for a while, I don't know, 170, 200 degrees, something like that. And then it will harden and crystallize. And that's how they stabilize a lot of pen blanks and stuff too. But that's a lot more involved than what Jim was talking about with the epoxy. You gotta have,
Don't have vacuums and stuff like
yeah,
that.
you gotta have the vacuum, you gotta have an oven. And so it's more involved. It's very effective. Myself, I've used cactus juice. I've done all that. But at the end of the day, I've got so much wood, I just don't have the time to fuss with it.
Well, I brought 3 wing stands, and as I've already learned today, I've left the tenon because it makes the turn the face fairly expedient. But what I've learned today is that I can use my spigot jaws, change the diameter of the hole that I'm using for the spindle, and I can finish the bottom in a different way. The wood for all 3 of them, I have no clue. I got it from here. It could be anything, and the finish is waterlogged. Seems to work really well. Yeah, 3 coats.
This is my first ever shot at, that's natural edge, not live edge. I picked up these blanks, I think it was from one of the online places, was selling them for like $12. I got 2 of them, came completely encased in what looked like gooey stuff.
That's what
Yeah, wax of some sort, and then shrink wrap. So when I took it out, it was pretty gloppy. I said, oh, let's just try to turn it. So I turned it, turned relatively well. And of course, when I turned it, it was nice and perfectly brown, but as you can tell now, it's nowhere close anymore. Which is all right, I think, with this. What bothered me about it is I got a wobble in the bottom. So I think on the second one, I may go through the same process again. And I bagged it for a while, maybe a month or so, and see what happens. And then return the bottom, leave the rest of it whole, and see what happens.
Paper bag.
Paper bag, yeah, not plastic bag.
And normally with the live edge, I do the same thing. Live edge for me is once turned, let it dry, and then trim the bottom. Nobody's really gonna know on a live edge that it's out of wrap.
Yeah, exactly. And, I kept thinking about, that I twice turned this thing.
So before we leave them, one note on live edge, probably everybody in this room knows this, but wood that's harvested this time of year in the dead of winter will generally retain the bark. Wood that's harvested in spring, generally spring or summer, generally won't. Unless you apply some CA glue along the camping layer, and the bark probably won't stay on. But wood that's harvested in the dead of winter will generally stay on its own.
remember what I think it was Woodworkers, Woodturners. They said they were winter cut. First one I ever did, had no problem at all. It just snuck. Moving on, I got bored one day in the shop, and Christmas showed up. Had a whole bunch of leftover bloodwood from the competition. I actually started trying to make it with many more layers, and I mean, this is the smallest ring I've ever turned. It's a nightmare. I realized it would be a Christmas 26 on the ring if I kept going that way, so up to the whiteboard, quick redesign, and I got it done there. So this one, it's still a work in progress. This is some of the throws. I'm actually trying to work on this ring. Jury's still out a little bit on how well it came out. I have another idea that I'm working on right now. Same kind of thing. It's 48 segments per row, which turns out to be a blooming nightmare. I'm using type on extend. I'm sweating going so fast. I got it down to the point right now where I probably only threw away 2 of the rings from doing this. The danger when you're working really, really fast, you'll get glue on the ring. Normally what happens after that is when you're sanding it or flattening it or something like that, you end up with little pieces of second total of the shot.
It's not good.
Not good.
What glue do you use?
Sorry?
What glue?
I use type on extend on this, and I'm finding it gives me about 15 minutes of working time. The other thing that's new about this one, and the first time I've ever done it, is I use the Bumble Shoots oil finish. I'm 3 coats in. I'm noticing today after I left it out cold last night that I can still see little spots on it right now, so I'm not so happy. So the jury is kind of out on whether I like this or not. I kind of like the idea that in cellar holes or something like that, I mean, there's nothing in it that can grow from the ground. So it doesn't get any more natural like that.
The one that I like is the hard wax oil. It's kind of tasty. Using that or functional salad bowls. No, it's the Bumble Shoots product.
I mean, the ingredients are tongue oil, salt, and one other thing in it, like nothing.
So I was digging through the log pile, looking actually for a piece of hickory, and at the bottom of that was a huge crotch piece of calva, which I completely forgot about, so ended it up on the lathe, and probably still needs a little bit of work, but it came out pretty good. It's about, probably, I'll be guessing probably 120 pounds when I started on the lathe. Probably wanted to get it up there and need to put some blocks in order to help me get it between centers, because it was a monster. So, but I like the window on that. That should have like a little clump of flowers in there. My daughter said if I left it out, the cap is probably going to make it a little. And obviously because it's Catella, it doesn't weigh anything. But big piece, and of course I couldn't really round it much because I wanted to be able to leave the flat sides so that I would end up with the voids. So yeah, so it was a little imbalanced to start, but Catella chews up pretty quick. So you get the speed up pretty quick after you get a little off. So. Thank you.
I made my first lidded box out of a little piece of malted maple, so it was an attempt. I think most of it came out good. It's not quite as tight as it needs to be, so the next one, it's amazing how you just take that one little extra off and you're like, ah, shoot, that's too much. But it was a nice little piece of wood, and I had fun doing it, and I got it pretty smooth, and so not too bad for the first try. And I also bought, thank you, I also bought 4 wig stands for you to take them come for.
Thank you so much. I want to take a couple minutes to show exactly the process that I use anyways to screw up a tenon after you've turned the bow. This bow is somewhat finished. This is a very simple chuck that I made, jam chuck, a little bit of draw liner cemented on the front. I cut these notches in here so that this could wrap around this curve. And I'll show you on that bowl, I'm gonna show you on this bowl. So you can see what happens with those pieces, because they're notched, they just kind of wrap around that radius on the chuck. Then presumably you would have had, when you rough turn this and rough turn this end, you would have had you would have used your tailstock. And so bring the tailstock up and recenter it. And then tighten it up. So, you know, this jig will kind of average, it'll be out around, but it'll kind of average it out. This bowl was one of the cord bowls that I talked about earlier, so this kicked out. I don't know if I'm going to return it or not. But this generally does a pretty good job of averaging the outer roundness. So now you can go through this setup, you can reach through the tenon, and again that little undercut that I talked about on the corner. And normally at this stage, I will take a cut on the outside, true that up, and then grab it in the chuck and do the inside. This is again, it's a very simple little chuck to make, but I use it a lot.
What was your fabric?
Just, you know, toolbox draw liner.
Oh, okay.
You know, it's, you can get a roll of it for not a lot of money.
Which the wood, plywood, or?
This is, yeah, it's some sort of plywood or LVL or something.
So do you have different size of those ones that you made?
Well, I have, yes and no. This one actually works pretty well for most of the bowls that I do. If you get something really big, you might want to do a bigger one.
Is that like 6 inches?
Excuse me?
Is it like 6 inches?
Yeah, it's about that. I can hand this around, if you'd like to look at it. There's a little faceplate on the back side. You can see that it is well used, but it's a little tool.
What glue do you use to glue
Just
that?
contact cement. How many people have lawnmower? And so there's a couple of tricks with them, as you guys know. So it's almost like a camera shutter, right? There's, I know, yeah, you can see these curves, or these grooves, the way they curve. It works like a camera shutter. And so as you rotate the two plates, these pins will get larger and smaller in diameter. So the idea behind this is to snug that up. I'm going to rotate this a little bit so I get out of my damaged area. And then with the wing nuts on the back, you snug these screws up. What this does is it compresses this rubber cone. So to get this to run true, you kind of want to do a staggered bolt head. So you do one and then you do the opposite one. Okay, and again, that rubber will expand. So then you go to the 90-degree one. And that one. And this will kind of keep it running true.
And you know what my experience is with that dog? Is I get to that point and, oh, I forgot to check the depth, the thickness of the bottom. And I gotta undo the whole bit.
Yeah. Been there.
Cold jaws are a slow process.
So there's a little bit of run out there. We probably could have helped ourselves if we'd started with putting a live center in there. So presumably, if you're at this point, right, you're trying to get the tenon off. And so use what you already have to center this up. You saw how much was running out without doing that. So we'll see how we do
What does that term running out mean?
the eccentricity.
We've had a set.
Okay. The wobble?
Wobble.
Sorry, I was a machinist first.
Yes.
It's place code. I think he's cloud. Works for me.
You see, it runs a little bit truer. And then it basically just goes through that same process again. Tight these and alternating pattern. And then I would leave the tailstock there until you get this tenon down as small as you can get it before you remove the tailstock. But kind of go through the same thing with vacuum trucks. Leave that tailstock on as long as you possibly can. And then remove it, just get that last little bit. For me, and these cup centers, generally what they call it, they also have, you know, you can screw on, so you're talking center like that.
Yeah.
So the cup centers resist splitting the wood. Okay, so think about splitting firewood, right? It takes a wedge, you're going to dry that wedge until you split it. And so those ones without this cup, you're doing the same thing. Keep driving the wedge. So over the process of turning the piece of wood, that comb will drive itself deeper and deeper. It loosen up, and then you'll tighten it, and it'll loosen up, and you'll tighten it, and loosen up. These cup centers resist that because they hold the wood together. And so, yes, there is a little combing, but it's contained by this cup that's also tight into the wood. And once you get that cup engaged, it stays pretty solid and it stays well. Like, most of these live centers, this is a 3/4 10 thread, and this is an adapter. I've forgotten now where I bought this, but you can buy this online or Woodcraft or Lowe places. But this will thread onto this live center, which now gives me the opportunity to put the chuck on this end first. And so what's nice about that is if you've got a piece chucked up, if you get your tenon made, you can bring this up. And now this chuck is perfectly centered with the lathe, and you chuck your piece and then take it off that. When you turn it around, it'll run pretty short.
Or if you want to put it on the vacuum chuck, I've done it that way too.
Yeah. Yeah, you can leave it on the chuck and turn around and put it on it, but it's already centered.
Yeah.
You've got a live center on that.
Yep.
So when I'm making a hollow form, segmented hollow form, that's this long, I make them in two pieces, two halves. And that's how I married the two halves, just with that setup. So I married the two halves, finished the blend in the outside, turn off that, I got the tenon on both ends, so turn off that tenon on this side and knock it up. That's how I do that all the time.
So we were just talking about the advantages of cup centers. This one is a large cup center. It's used as a drive rather than a hot center. But you have a couple choices on, well, you have numerous choices on drive centers. I mean, this is a classic for drive center. This is one that actually gets clamped into a chuck, so you insert that, you clamp the chuck. That's the little star center. So my experience with these two is if you get too aggressive and you split, if you overwhelm the gripping power of that, then you make a groove and they're very difficult to recover. They don't bind as well. For some reason, and I guess in my feeble mind I figured out why, But if this slips, you just tighten it up and it's good again. But the cup keeps you from splitting, and you tighten it up, you increase the friction with the others, you actually chew the wood out of the groove. About any cup, you just put it in, use it like a worm screw. Yeah, check it out. And so speaking of worm screws, I'm sure a lot of you use these, maybe some of you don't. Typically a worm screw, you take a 5/16 hole, you put it in the face of the bowl, you clamp it in your chuck, and that bowl is going to get turned out when you hollow out the bowl anyway. This is a very coarse, very aggressive thread, so you spin your piece of wood on there, bump it up against the face of the chuck, it squares everything up, it's solid. Bring your tailstock up, and then you can do your first part of your turning operation on a bowl. I'm sure everybody knows that, but I thought I'd
Is there a size at which point you might not use the screw chuck and then go to more of a faceplate?
Yes. And it depends on how courageous you are.
One and the same amount.
Large pieces, this is a 6-inch faceplate. From one way, this cast iron. There's a lot of holes in this. When it's 6 times 3, so there's 18 holes in this. So you can put 18 screws in. And if you really want the maximum gripping power, you put this on your piece and put all 18 screws in, and it couldn't go anywhere.
They also sell aluminum, and you wonder why aluminum is so much cheaper. It's less expensive to manufacture, but it's certainly not as safe. One, it may not stay true, but the one major detractor is if you're using it a lot, the screws are eating away a little more of the aluminum every time, and it deepens the socket. Spend the extra $20.
I don't have any aluminum faceplates because I'm worried aluminum will go. And I don't want the threads on the spindle to get galled up with aluminum, so I just, people use them, there's a lot of them out there. That's my personal opinion, why I don't use them, I don't want to get the threads galled up.
Also, with faceplate, don't use drywall screws.
Right.
That's the question. What screws do you people use? I've broken a few by accident, so I throw them out, just the regular wood screws on them.
Stacks, good construction screws, something like that.
But you use them only a couple times?
So you get, I use the ones that go into concrete, actually, the ones.
Oh, okay.
You know, the blue ones.
That's a good idea.
Tap-ons.
They really have good thread engagements. They're thick, they're solid as all get out.
Okay.
Tap-ons, that's it.
What is the minimum penetration of the thread before?
The depth of your bowl.
Pardon?
The depth of your bowl. No, I mean, that's a really good question. I mean, you want to go in, you want to have, I would say, at least 1 inch to 1.5 inches of screw in the wood. You know, there's a lot of force, there's a lot of, especially when you first start out, there's, you know, the thing's on around, it's bouncing around. Depends on how many screws you have, certainly. If you have 18 screws, then maybe you don't need to go quite so deep, but.
Well, the bowl, you're going on side grains, so your screws will get good purchase.
Yeah.
Going into end grain for some reason,
Yes.
more depth would be.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a good rule of thumb there, but I tend to go a little bit overboard.
Yeah. I've heard the rule of thumb is 7 threads, a minimum of 7 threads.
Okay.
I was gonna say, I heard something about 6 or 8, I can't remember where I saw it, but it was a recommendation for that. I do everything between centers, so.
I've always used 1 inch sheet metal screws. And I've started using the square thing as opposed to the Phillips.
Yeah.
The Phillips square things will fill.
Yep.
You don't throw as many screws on it. But I only use 1 inch, and I've used it on the one-way faceplate. I've used it on the Laguna faceplates and the Jet faceplates. I've never had one that got clean loose.
Other thing to watch for, if you have if a hole in the faceplate is tapered, use a tapered screw.
Yeah.
Don't use a flathead screw.
So, Phil, I wanted to ask you what your thoughts were on aluminum faceplates. This is a Raycon guy.
We don't sell them. They're cheap to make, they're cheaper to buy, we can sell them for more. There's a reason we don't sell them.
Same reason I don't use them.
But the other thing we talked about was screw center. I'll do a 16, 18 inch bowl, no problem. Just bring your tailstock up and watch your speed. There's a great video online. The guy's got one of our lathes. We're at the source. He was doing a bowl with his worm chuck, and he hit the power button, he said, and it came off. But the idiot was running a 14 inch bowl at about 2,000 RPM with no tailstock. And one blade came off. So when you play the video back, it shows it didn't hit the button and it just came off. And then he made a whole video, did this whole science experiment about how it happens. No, just accept responsibility, you're being stupid. People don't do that. What is your tailstock? It will literally save you. And keep it on for as long as you can. And you can turn a 16 inch bowl between centers using, with no attachment, if you're using everything right. Just use your tailstock. Don't be stupid.
That way, I start almost everything, even large stuff, between centers. It gives you the opportunity to recenter and find the orientations, but it's also very safe inherently, because you do sometimes dig out the hole where you drive center.
And you don't try to take off too big of a chunk, and you set the speed right. So using a bit of caution is the best thing you can do.
But that's good advice. If you can use the tailstock, use it. And there comes a point where it's in the way and you can't. Certainly use it until you get the piece trimmed up. Any other questions? Any difficulties anybody's had?
I just have a question. What is the real difference between the long grip and the cold jaws in terms of what people use for references? They're similar, right?
Yes, it's similar. I'm not I'll preface this with I'm not a cold jaw expert. I don't really use it. The cold jaws have plates, they have holes in the plates for these problems.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how it's going to typically be hard or soft.
It's a long word, aluminum. If the cold jaws are a lot of work to change out. They're just too much trouble. They change out. They call it screws out.
Well, I can tell you, when you put the cold jaws on, you get some wobble in each of the plates that you're putting on. It appears that you're getting a flat surface here with that. So that looked pretty perfect. I've never used that, but I'm definitely going to go home and check it out.
Pretty much, just a practical thing. I have one of those, but it turns very hard. And sometimes I really have to give it.
Yeah, the one that I have turns very hard too. This one is nice. This one,
yeah,
this one has very smooth.
Sawdust gets in there, so we gotta clean it, sawdust.
Can you take it apart?
And if any of the screws are tight a little bit, it'll be hard to turn.
You want to
These are the screws on the back, it'll turn a lot easier. And then it fills up with sawdust there between the plates, and it's harder to turn.
Yeah, it's getting harder and harder.
So on the, what do you call those little rubber things that hold the bowl on? What do you call them?
So before I answer that, on these two, there's a maximum speed, typically 600. I mounted the pole one time, brought the tailstock up, and forgot to tighten all the little screws. They all went to the outside almost instantly. So centrifugal force brings them out. So that's why there's a maximum speed on it. Typically, it's 600. I don't know about this one. but that's the reason there's a maximum speed. Good point.
Yeah, mine has a maximum, I can't scan, but I must see.
The light says 600.
They're all, I think they're all the same, 600, because I was looking at, I don't know, I never used one, but I have one with the chuck that I got, and just I learned a little about it, and so I'm pretty much read the directions of all the things, and I think you're right, that just, that RPMs is there and nothing more, okay? Now, I was gonna ask you a question about that, those little nubs there, right? What do you call them? The rubbers that hold the bowl?
No.
The nubs, is that what you call them? Nubs. Well, can you put, different type nubs on there like that, like you said? The ones that come square sort of, you can turn them and get different shapes?
A good segue into vacuum truck. I have a long work truck, I really don't use it that much, I normally go in the vacuum truck. Because with vacuum trucking, obviously, there's a kit that you have to get. This setup is the Frugal Vacuum Truck Job.com. Very creative web name.
Unfortunately, he's finally retired.
Yeah, he's quite longer. Somebody took it over. Well, these vacuum pumps are refurbished medical grade. I can't remember what they're used for. Do you remember what they're used for?
Oxygen concentrated.
Oxygen
Suction
concentrated.
is also suction too.
And so he was getting these things from hospitals or whatever that had been worn out, rebuilding them. There's probably a couple of rebuilds or whatnot in there, and then reselling them, repackaging them with this. So there was this whole kit that you had. When I first bought mine, he was selling these little seal bearings
Yeah.
that you could glue into. Here's one of my older ones that still has a hole, but you would glue the seal bearing into your vacuum truck. And then another tube that slid into this tube, because of the vacuum, it would kind of seal itself. And you would have a tube coming out of the back of the lathe that would then go to this. Now, this is a simple fuel filter that you can buy anywhere, but this is important because you don't want to suck sawdust through the pump. And here you will see there's a vacuum gauge. I have this valve. This valve has two uses. You can release pressure when you're done, or if you've got a thin wall piece. I've actually had times, well, not that I've ever messed up a bowl, but I had a bowl that was so thin, the vacuum was so much, it was concaving the bottom of it, and I kept working it until I finally went through the bottom because I didn't understand what was going on. And so if you have something that's thin or thin walled, you could throttle the vacuum with this and just back it off a little bit. But the tendency is to keep the vacuum as high as you can, or as low as you can in this case, to make sure the bowl stays on. This thing it does make a bit of noise. But it's not bad. So, that's full vacuum, about minus 25. So there's a variety of vacuum chucks that you can make. Most of these I've made myself. There's actually some that are made out of aluminum that have a poofy gasket on the outside. So typically when I'm doing the second side of the bowl, I would use something like this. This is actually a vacuum chuck.
You put one of those little soft washers in when you do it?
No. Well, this bowl isn't turned true, but kind of the same thing as I mentioned with the Longworth truck. You already have a mark for your center. So you bring your bowl up. I don't know if this one will seal or not.
find out.
Nope. See that?
No.
No. Well, it's not flat, this bowl is all warped and convoluted. But, I mean, that's the message on how you chew these up on it.
And you made that faceplate too?
Yeah. Again, that's just, and this rubber is a closed cell foam silicone rubber with an adhesive backing, so you don't really have to use contact nets with this one. This one has some cracks in it, maybe it's sealed. Yeah, good luck. We've got just a little bit of pressure on here. I don't have a center on this one. Got a lot of pressure. But I've been known to just kind of do it by eye. Not too unreasonable. Like 80 grand.
Still not there, about half where you should be.
That's what I mean, that's general. It'll stay pretty well. Turning it a bit. So, when I'm finishing a bowl, I generally prefer to do this for a couple of reasons. It maximizes the amount of available vacuum. Vacuum is like air pressure is 1,000 square inch. And so, for any given bowl, this is the maximum section I can put on it turning off the grid. And that will hold pretty tight. I still, even though it's on the vacuum chuck, when I'm turning the fend off, bring the tailstock up until it's in the way and I can't use it anymore. By hand, I got such a small gun, the tangential force of the turning is very small, and I look the same. Just a couple other options that I suppose I should talk about this a little bit. When you take the vacuum away, the bowl comes off. Again, there's several different choices with the vacuum chucking. The tool one that I talked about from the frugal vacuum chuck guy. This is a rotary coupling that I made on that little lathe. This follows the design of Robust on my lathe, which is the one that they sell to go to their lathe. So basically the same design, but made to fit this lathe. And it draws vacuum through the spindle and through the chuck. But I did want to talk about some of these other vacuum chucks. This one is a piece of 6-inch PVC coupling. This silicone sheet, and I have some samples here that self-adhesive on the back. You just put it on, you spin it up, and you can cut it, make a gasket. This one's nice, it's big, it's sturdy. The problem with it is when you draw a vacuum on it, it's kind of a sharp edge and it will sometimes leave a mark at the bottom of the bowl that you have to stay in an elevator. But it does work well. So I made this on a piece of LVL, put a faceplate on it, there's just cement screws, and used a negative rake tool to chew up this edge and make it round it over. So they run true with the lathe. But again, this one has been known to leave marks in the bottom of the bowl. which is why I prefer these flat ones, because it's just on the rim, doesn't leave a mark. This one though, sometimes if you have a loft edge bowl, you obviously can't run it on the rim. So this one kind of solves a couple of problems. You can put a live edge bowl on it, but this nice gently rounded surface does not leave a mark on the bottom of the bowl. And again, if we had a tailstock, or if we had the mark from the tailstock, it would, you'd line it up that way, but we'll have to do it by eye. Fairly quickly do that by eye. Again, you don't have as much surface area that you're drawing a vacuum on, so you're not going to be able to hold this one as tight as you would on the rim. Anybody want to come up and pull that off? Like I say, use the tailstock until you can't use it anymore. But it's on there pretty good. Let's talk a little bit about the gaskets. This one has this sticky back foam sheets. You can buy this at Michael's or Joanne Fabrics. Peel off and stick on. And
Joanne's gone.
Yeah, it's been sold.
Well, I bought some at Walmart. They're everywhere.
Amazon.
Yeah, they're pretty cheap. I don't know, less than $1 a sheet.
You get them online too.
Yeah. It seals pretty well, and again, it tends to last longer. I just made a large faceplate like this, and I used this stuff, jury stuff. I think it's a little bit thick, but it'll take up more non-conformities in the surface. And then there's this stuff I've used, which is what this is. No, it's not what this is. But anyway, you have to use contact cement to apply this. So, I don't know, I mean, that's a 10-minute dissertation on vacuum checking. There's a lot more to it than that. There's a lot of different variations. This is one that I've used for making wine glass stems. Okay, so it's deep, so I can put it in there and finish the bottom of a wine glass stem. This one, I don't know. Not sure what I used it for, but well, that was effective at the time. Sometimes those spalted yellow birch bowls, they're full of wormholes, difficult to draw a vacuum.
So when you're using them, you draw a lot of sawdust through to fill that filter up really fast.
Yeah, that filter is really important. This is going to be a kind of a coarse demo, but all right. So it's not running too bad, but clearly it's not going to see it. So in most cases, you go to Home Depot, we get a roll of this
Shrink wrap.
shrink wrap.
What do you think of this?
Wrap it up good and tight.
about 20, maybe, almost 25.
So I've been known to do this. Solve some problems.
Things on there nice and snug too. Now, can you just trim the plastic away where you want to work? or you-
Yeah. So sometimes I keep the plastic, because I'm trimming the bottom here. Keep the plastic and use with that green painter's tape, green frog tape.
Yeah.
Doesn't stick to the wood. It'll hold down the plastic and keep everything sealed up. My experience has been that Vicmar probably runs the best.
They're,
It sure was.
I think in any circle, anybody that knows anything will tell you Vicmark runs the back.
The Novas are pretty good as well. But then you pay a premium for Vicmar. Vicmar, you know, probably the best quality, but also the highest price. You know, as Claude said, you only buy this thing once.
One thing that might work, I actually haven't done it, but I just sort of thinking is, as far as lubrication, cyclists, they use this lube for their chains that is basically wax and alcohol. And, because they don't want dirt to get caught on the chain and the gear and sprockets, and they rinse it all the time, and it doesn't stick. I've used it on my bike, and there's just the chain's pretty clean all the time, you don't get grit on it. So it might work for that.
Yeah, that sounds like it would. Let's pick on, so when these jaws are manufactured, they make solid grain, right? And they turn that, and they'll grind it, and then they'll cut these 4 sections out. And so depending on the curve width of those sections, so I'm gonna guess it's probably something like that. So when these jaws are in this position, they're round. Now, you want to try to have your tenon match that as much as possible, so that you have as much contact as much as possible. But as you open this up, now it kind of becomes a clover leaf. And so what happens is, the jaws are way open, now you're clamping on the corners. And you got the corners digging into the wood, and you're not really clamping in these areas.
You see it pretty well on here.
Yeah,
There we
so that's a good point. So this tenon was a little bit bigger than the jaws around. You could see the staining, so there wasn't contact in there. It was digging in here and here. So it's a fine line, because when you're making that tenon, if you go undersized, then obviously you're not going to be able to grip it. And I've done that many times, so end up wrapping tape around the tenon to get it on there. So there's a fine line, there's some tolerance for these things. Now, if it's not that fussy, maybe it doesn't matter that much. But if you're trying to get a bowl to run true, I think you kind of want to match the diameter of that tenon as close as you can to the natural round of the jaws. I've run out of stuff to talk about, I guess.
Okay.